chair this meeting tonight. I hope Kate's having a good time wherever she is. Welcome to our people in Lafayette. If you're in Lafayette and you can hear me, would you put your thumbs up? Pay attention. Lafayette folks, thumbs up. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
All right. There we are. Okay. Okay, first item on the agenda is public open time. Are there any members of the public here that would like to speak on items that are not on the agenda?
Chair, this is Lyman. First item, I'd like to do a board announcement if that's possible.
Okay.
It's a AB 1234 report. It's associated with my attending California ISO symposium in Sacramento, which was yesterday and today. It was
Director Lyman, if you can pull the mic slightly further away, I think that'll help.
further away. Okay.
Thank you.
What I learned over the last 2 days of symposiums in Sacramento, the ISO held the symposium and brought many members from the power industry together. Not that many elected officials, so it was interesting to be there representing MCE in that behalf. One of the things that I learned a lot about was variable supply dividend. This is the concept of putting our solar surplus to benefit and not to curtail it. There was a lot of discussion about decarbonization of our power system that's inevitable. So we will have a low to no carbon system of power generation at some point, which will require the electrification of all things. It'll be necessary to achieve greenhouse gas reductions. We'll have to electrify our transportation and our buildings. Stop thinking about cooking with natural gas. One of the things that was discussed at length, it permeated over many of the discussions, is regionalization, which is the best way to balance renewable energy over the entire western states. Geothermal from Nevada, wind from the Rockies, hydro from the Northwest, solar from California. That's something that's going to be on our horizon for many years to come, and be the best way for us to address the surplus of solar we have during the middle of the day. Today there was a discussion on integrated resource plans, which there is an item later tonight about integrated resource plans. And that's, the discussion was about, it was by the regulators and about how the legislated and the regulated implement what the public is interested in. The technology and it was also permeated the discussions tremendously with regards to generation and dispatch. And essentially, one of the comments was the only way to harness our distribution and local generation options is through technology and digitization. So that's something that we will, again, be looking at as time goes on. And finally, I would like to close my remarks with the fact that legislators and regulators need to focus on the absolute results, greenhouse gas reductions, and allow the market to be innovative, flexible, to respond to those solutions. These are some of the takeaway points. I've been asked by staff over various days, what did I learn? And I honestly said that I realized I don't know as much as I thought I knew. And it did take quite a bit of time for me to synthesize all the things that I heard over the last 2 days, and I really do appreciate, I know staff did encourage us to all of us to go, and I would recommend, if you have the opportunity next year, which will be the 10th conference symposium, that you take the opportunity to go. Thank you. And that does fulfill my AB 1234 requirements.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public here to speak? Yes, please. Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, and let's celebrate the rain.
I know all the mountainous area, so really appreciate that. So my name is Carlene Cullen, and I'm a Marin resident. I'm a mom, and I'm also a tech entrepreneur that started an information technology company in the 80s, took it public, and eventually sold it. And the past 10 years, I've been dedicating my life to trying to do something about climate change. I started a nonprofit here in Marin called Cool the Earth, and it's expanded to actually internationally. Over the past decade, it's a behavior change program, reached kids and their parents. We reached 500,000 kids and parents, and inspired about 300,000 climate-saving actions. And it occurred to me last year, we always talk about these actions could be the equivalent of taking a car off the road if you do these 25 things. And as lithium-ion battery prices dropped precipitously, 73% over the past 7 years, it occurred to me now it's time to actually take those emissions off the road from the car. And deep green is obviously an essential element of this for us in the Bay Area. So I'm here to comment on a few things, and one of them is to ask for bold action. MCE started, I was involved in that process way back when, with tremendous aspirations and has delivered on those. I think with EV technology, there's the next moment of opportunity, a really watershed moment. And that's my primary message, is to say, we love in the EV world, we would love to see all of our CCAs across the state engage in advancing EVs. I should also disclose that I'm also on, this is not part of this, but just for full disclosure, I'm on Gavin Newsom's gubernatorial policy committee campaign. So just to make that clear as well, although I'm here just as an EV advocate. To me, deep green and EVs go together like peanut butter and chocolate, if you guys remember those commercials from back when. I see it as a triple play, emissions, economy, and equity. One of the things we're working on, in addition to this new campaign called Drive Clean Marin, which we plan to replicate with community-based organizations throughout the Bay Area, for their Drive Clean Alameda and their Drive Clean San Francisco, is one of the things we're working on is a new possibility for daytime solar absorption, which is being implemented in Lancaster, California, but is really broadly implemented in Europe, where the excess amperage is available on streetlights in our commercial areas, as well as just in communities where disadvantaged communities or multi-unit dwelling communities, where there's always an issue about where can they charge their electric vehicles. In many cases, we have the opportunity to attach basically level 2 charging stations to the streetlights, so there's no trenching, costs are really low, it's metered parking and metered electricity as well. So that's just one possibility. But I just wanted to say those few things. I could go on for an hour, but I appreciate your time, and I hope you all will consider advancing EVs as part of your agenda.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I apologize for coming in late, so I don't know if anybody mentioned this before, but I just want to take this opportunity for anybody watching to make sure that everybody in Marin County is signed up for alertmarin.org, and I'm sure in all of your counties there's an equivalent way to sign up. If you don't have a landline, that's going to be the only way that they're going to be able to get a reverse 911 call to you. So I just want to take that opportunity to remind people.
Are there any public speakers in Lafayette who would like to address the commission?
No, there's not. We have a member of the public pushing.
Hearing none, okay. We will move to a report from our Chief Executive Officer.
Great, and if I may, before I get in, I have a couple of items I want to cover, but first I thought it might be a good idea to do a round of introductions since we have some new faces, new board members, we're still getting to know each other, and we have folks remote, so I want to make sure that everyone can hear each other. So maybe we can start with the San Rafael location and just do a quick roundtable stating your name and the community that you represent, starting with Director Withy.
Ray Withy, City of Sausalito.
Hi, I'm Rupert Russell from Ross.
Andrew McCullough from San Rafael. Barbara Kohler from Fairfax.
I'm Butts, City of Richmond.
Bob McCaskill, City of Belvedere.
Emmett O'Donnell, Tiburon.
Greg Lyman, City of El Cerrito.
Sashi McEntee, City of Mill Valley.
Elizabeth Patterson, City of Benicia.
Brad Wagonknecht, the cities in the county of Napa.
Maureen Toms, City of Pinole.
Great, and now,
Also have the staff join in.
okay,
Go
great
ahead.
idea.
Go ahead, John.
I'm John DeLessie with Pacific Energy Advisors.
And Kermit Ucell also with Pacific Energy Advisors.
Darlene Jackson, Board Clerk.
Don Wise, CEO. Beth Kelly, General Counsel.
Aaron Vosberg, member of the Power Resources Team.
Great, and now would the folks in Lafayette be able to introduce themselves?
Folks in Lafayette, would you like to go around and introduce yourselves?
Pete Longmire, City of Pittsburgh.
Can we turn the volume up on that at all?
County of Contra Costa. Eddie Bursan, City of Concord. Dave Trotter, Town of Moraga. Scott Perkins, City of San Ramon.
Lisa Blackwell, Town of Danville.
Rob Schroeder, City of Martinez.
Great, thanks very much. That was really helpful, and we're able to hear you all pretty well now. Please let us know if you're having trouble hearing us, and we'll keep improving as we go. So I have a couple of things I wanted to update folks on today. First of all, I wanted to just remind folks, since we're broadcasting remotely, to make sure and state your name when you speak so that folks on in the other location will know who you are. We'll make every effort to remember to pause for input from both locations as we go through the agenda items. Feel free to speak up if you have something you need to say or question. The next item is, I just wanted to give an update on the fire impacts that we've been experiencing in our service area. As many of you know, I wanted to start off by thanking Director Wagonknecht for making it all the way down here in a time of real crisis. And I know you've been going through a lot and needing to provide a lot of support in your community. And we're here to provide as much support as we can. Thank you for making it down here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Many folks have been impacted in our communities and to the north. Several MCE staff families have been impacted directly by the fire. And many of you offered to help out by sheltering evacuees and helping to provide support during the evacuations. MCE actually hosted staff from Sonoma Clean Power, our sister CCA agency to the north, and they were actually working out of this room for a few days when they were unable to use their offices due to the evacuation and the air quality. And it created a nice opportunity for collaboration. The direct impact to MCE is, as far as economic impacts, is relatively minor, but it's been a really good learning experience, I think, for us to prepare for future emergencies. We are going to be delaying bills for customers that have been directly impacted. That is the common practice of PG&E, and we'll be using the same approach that PG&E uses. Currently, the estimate is just over 3,500 customers in MCE service territory that have been impacted either directly by the fires or the evacuations or road closures. And as those customers have their service turned back on, we'll be getting them back into the system to have the regular bill schedule go into effect. But for now, we're ceasing any collection activity or billing activity until those customers are back turned on. There's a much smaller subset of customers that actually no longer have a building, and so we'll be getting final information on those numbers within the next few weeks, and we'll be working that into our load forecast going forward. Do folks have any questions on the fire impacts before I move on? Mm-hmm.
Just when you do start billing them, how do the bills work? Do they get 2 months worth of bills, or do we space it out so it eases the payment?
Yeah, the way that the billing works is it is cumulative, so any charges that have accumulated over that period of time will show up on the bill. For homes that have, or buildings that have been completely destroyed, the charges would end as of October 8th, the day before the incident. There may also be a need to do some bill forgiveness for that final bill for buildings that were destroyed, and that's something we're working with PG&E on to determine what the best practice is.
Is there anything we can do to space, PG&E has a program, which I don't.
Can't hear that.
Oh, sorry, PG&E has a program, which I don't think we have, which allows billing to be spaced out over 12 months so they don't get a big spike in the bill. Is that something we can do? But I thought we don't have that program.
Yeah, we're actually going to be talking about that later on the agenda today. But I think for the purposes of returning customers for lack of payment, that type of forgiveness is going to be in place for a few months so that folks have time to kind of catch up.
Chairman, can I be recognized? So, Elizabeth Patterson from Benicia in Solano County. There was some fire activity in Solano, and a lot of large animals have been moved down to the fairgrounds in Vallejo. However, that's not what I wanted to tell you. I was going to tell you what happened with power. Napa, a lot of the firefighting is dependent on water from the State Water Project, which goes through the Cordelia pump station, which is also connected with Benicia's single pipeline. And PG&E cut the power because they didn't want power running through their lines. So you had a wise decision to cut power so you didn't have any more sparking. But on the other hand, that meant you couldn't pump water to fight the fire that was already raging. So to make a sort of interesting story short, this engineer at Solano County Water Agency had one business card from someone at Travis Air Force Base, called, the guy was at the desk, and he says, yeah, we can bring generators over. Well, you should see these generators. I mean, you could probably run half a city. And so they brought the generators over and they powered the power to get to the, for the firefighters and have access to the water from the State Water Project.
Any questions or comments from anybody in Lafayette? No? Okay, go ahead.
I like it.
Hey, thanks. And I just, I wanted to just let folks know that we've been participating in a couple of events since the last time we were together at the board retreat. There was a California Community Choice Association annual meeting down in Riverside that we participated in. There was a lot of interest, a lot of participation from CCAs around the state, and also suppliers and other service providers for CCAs. I'm happy to say more about that offline. If folks have questions, let me know. We also participated in the Northern California Power Authority annual meeting a couple of weeks ago, as we're building stronger partnerships with the municipal utilities around the state, as we have a lot of shared regulatory and policy objectives and can support each other on the legislative front. So we're building those connections, and we'll also be participating in the CMUA, another municipal utility association meeting next week. We also participated in a supplier diversity en banc that was put on by the California Public Utilities Commission a couple of weeks ago in Pomona. And we're in the process of planning a follow-up meeting just for MCE and other CCAs to talk about supplier diversity and showcase all the good work that we're doing to hire from diverse suppliers, and also to bring more diversity into the workforce. That'll be coming up in late January. We don't yet have a date, but we'll be letting you know as soon as we do, if all of you can participate. And the last meeting I wanted to let you all know about is we participated in a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Public Power Association in Sacramento, which is a group of municipal utilities, public power providers from around the western United States. And they're very interested in the community choice model and partnering on policy objectives, where we have overlap in our objectives. The next item I wanted to update you all on is we've made a lot of progress in identifying a good fit for an office in Concord, and we expect to have lease negotiations underway and wrapping up towards the end of the month. We may be bringing a final lease to the executive committee for approval in November. So stay tuned for more on that. Wanted to let folks know that our regular holiday party will be held on December 15th this year at the Richmond Country Club. It's our first time having the holiday party there. We're really looking forward to it. We hope you all can make it. It'll be a great time to kind of socialize and get to know each other better. So save the date for that. And last of all, I wanted to let folks know that our next board meeting, which will be in November, will be held in Concord at the council chambers. The city council chambers for Concord have been made available to us both for the November meeting and the January meeting. We will not be holding a regular board meeting in December because it falls pretty late in the month where we may have trouble getting a quorum. But just wanted y'all to know our primary location for November and January will be Concord. We can probably accommodate folks here as an alternate, but encourage you to try and get out to Concord if you can for that meeting so we can have as many folks there in person as possible. And that's it for my report.
And do you think you can help coordinate some carpooling from this location to Concord?
Absolutely, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now have the consent calendar, and there are 2 items on it. Does anybody wish to remove anything from the consent calendar?
I move the consent calendar.
We have a motion to move the
Second.
consent calendar by Wagon Connect, second. By Wyman. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Mr. Chair, Ray Withy, Sausalito, I need to abstain on item C1.
Okay, show Commissioner Withy abstaining on item C1.
I need to abstain on item C1 as well as Rupert
Okay.
Russell from Ross.
Commissioner Russell abstaining on item C1.
And Maureen Toms abstaining on item C1.
Commissioner Thompson abstaining on item C1.
Elizabeth Patterson abstaining on C1.
Okay. Commissioner Patterson abstaining.
The same with Commissioner McCullough. I'd also like to point out to my chagrin that I was not at the retreat, so the minute should be corrected to reflect my absence, not my presence.
Thank you.
The modified minutes.
Thank you for that correction.
Okay, you got the vote? All right, thank you. Next item is item 5, MCE Draft Integrated Resource Plan.
Great. So we're going to be hearing from Byron Vosberg, who is MCE's Power Supply Contracts Manager. And Byron, you're welcome to go up to the podium or speak from there, whatever is easier for you. While Byron's coming up, I'll just let you all know for our newer board members that the Integrated Resource Plan is a undertaking that we tend to see every October, November. Every fall we update our Integrated Resource Plan. We've been doing this for many, many years, and every year it just gets better and better. So we're really excited to talk to you about this today. It really gives you a sense of how we are planning to do our procurement going out 10 years. So it's a really exciting topic. It's really the heart of what MCE does in many cases. So we're excited to hear from Byron on this.
Great, thank you, Don. Can everyone hear me? Is this mic working? And in Lafayette, as we can't see, as we've transitioned to the projector here, we can't see you anymore, but please speak up if you have any trouble hearing me, or if we need to, if you have any questions or we need to review. So again, as Don said, I'm Byron Vosberg. I've been here on the Power Resources team at MCE for about a year. And this is my second go around now with our integrated resource plan. So it's been a fun process. Every year, as Don said, I think we try to improve it, and like the way it's progressing this year as well. For kind of context for where we sit in the process right now, the integrated resource plan, we're expecting to take it to the technical committee in November for approval. But as we have had a number of new board members join us recently, first of all, welcome, and nice to meet you guys for those that I haven't seen before. As we have a number of new members, we thought we'd give an overview of our integrated resource plan and the process behind it, so that everyone's familiar with it before we take it to the technical committee. So this is kind of an informational and a background of integrated resource planning at MCE. And I believe in your board packet as well, there is a draft of the current integrated resource plan. I want to emphasize it is a draft. It's not final yet, but it's getting pretty close, and we like as I said, the direction's moving, and we will again be wrapping this up in the next week or so, and then taking it to technical committee in November, the first week in November. Any questions before I jump in? Okay. So this slide deck will look somewhat familiar to those of you on the technical committee. I know we've been through this a couple times before, so hopefully you guys can hang tight with us and enjoy it again. And those of you who this is the first time through, feel free to stop me for any questions, and hopefully this will be some good context background. So historical context for the integrated resource planning here at MCE. The first real integrated resource plan that talked about our load forecast and our resource plan was included in our initial implementation plan, which we filed in January of 2010. And then it was in kind of one chapter, it was chapter 6 of that implementation plan, and that was updated then as MCE expanded later in 2011 and then twice in 2012. That implementation plan was updated, and with it, chapter 6, the load forecast and resource plan was updated as well. So that was kind of the beginnings. The first 4 real resource plans we did were that way. Then in November of 2012, MC put together its first standalone integrated resource plan. I'll probably jump to just calling it an IRP from here on out. Hopefully there's no confusion there, but an IRP is less of a mouthful. So the first IRP was in November of 2012, and then it's been updated every year annually since then as a standalone document. And typically we update it kind of in the end of the year, around fall, October, November, to kind of set it's a 10-year document, a 10-year plan looking forward for the next year, and then 9 more after that. We update it really in the end of the year so that our open season process, which is our big procurement cycle that we start in the beginning of the calendar year, we have a good sense of where we are and kind of set forward our goals for procurement beginning of the next year. Excuse me. In May then of 2015, the MCE board delegated approval of the IRP from the board to the technical committee. So since that time, we've been going to the technical committee for approval, and then typically reviewing, obviously, with the board as well. Yes?
Barbara Kohler, Fairfax. So I have a question, and maybe I just misunderstood that. When I was reading the staff report, I saw that the delegated... Trying not to yell, but apparently I'm not doing it.
Go ahead, yell.
Okay. I had a question about how we delegated the IRP approval authority in an overview. I'm used to formal delegations for important matters like this. And I've been on this board since, I think, 2013 or 14, and I don't remember ever seeing formal delegations. It might be more a question for Elizabeth, but it kind of troubles me if we're doing it through an overview of a committee rather than what looks like specific authorities, and then we delegate that as a board. So perhaps I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I can speak to that and just provide a little refresher. So two retreats ago, we spent a lot of time talking about the growing size of our board.
No, I totally understand that we're trying to move things to different committees, and I was part of that. But what I'm talking about is not proving delegations of authority through an overview of a committee, but rather something that's a formal delegation of authority. So I'm just talking about process, not my concern about moving things to different committees.
Yeah, so the delegation to the technical committee was a formal process. That was a decision that was voted on by the full board about 2 years ago.
Okay, so to me, it looks like it was just an overview of the technical committee, not something, I guess I'm just used to seeing very legal delegations of authority, and that's not what
We can provide that to you. Yeah,
Okay,
that was,
so
it was
we did
part of
do
the board
that.
action. We did do it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Great, thank you. And any other questions? All right, we'll keep moving then. So we'll get into the purpose of the IRP. As I mentioned, it's a 10-year planning document. The first here is to plan our resource needs over the next 10 years. And as I mentioned, the 2018 draft of the IRP, which we're doing here in 2017 for 2018 through 2027 is our current. We want to obviously prioritize our resource preferences and articulate the policies that we have, and really just give direction to our team here as we go about our energy procurement and move forward throughout the next 1 year especially, but 10 years as well. Provide guidance, as I said, to energy procurement processes undertaken by MCE staff. and then to communicate our resource planning policies, objectives, and framework to the public and the markets and any other stakeholders as well. So it really serves many purposes, one of which is internal to help us guide and to help guide us, I should say, as staff, and then also communicate to the broader community, whether it be regulatory boards or to others as well, what we're doing, and kind of provide our positions and our intent to the market as we start to deal with energy providers. Any questions on that before we keep moving? Great. So our key resource planning policies here at MCE, I hope none of these are a surprise. Certainly stop me if they are. But our first, obviously, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants through increased use of renewables, greenhouse gas-free and low greenhouse gas energy resources. The second is to maintain competitive electric rates. The third is to benefit our local economy through investment in infrastructure and energy programs. Fourth, to help customers reduce their energy consumption and electric bills, so driving, increasing efficiency and reducing consumption and subsequently bills. To enhance system reliability of the overall electric grid and the system itself, and then to actively monitor and manage MCE's risks, both from an operational standpoint and within the energy market. Are there any questions around those? I think they're all pretty common sense, but any, yeah, go ahead.
Would you, drilling down into any of those particular things, would you want me to wait till we get to that section?
Hear you.
I think they'd like you to speak into the mic.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Ben.
Sashi McEntee, City of Mill Valley. If I have questions on drilling down further into any of those, do you want me to wait till you get to that section or talk about it?
We can go ahead and talk about it now.
Okay, good. So on hedging the market risks, you have that, and I apologize, we're just getting this copy right here, right? Didn't get it in again. So on page 30, the time horizon and fixed price energy contracting guidelines, is that what kind of dictates what you're going to purchase now versus what you're going to sort of leave open? What I'm getting at is how are you hedging against market risk through the strategy? And is that the right place for me to look?
Sure, that's a great question. Which page were you on there?
Page 30 of 38, the
Sure.
table. I was looking at the table at the top of that page.
Yes, that is it. When we look at kind of our overall energy needs, again, the general guidelines. We may deviate as we take advantage of good opportunities if we need to, but typically those are our guidelines for what we want to have signed this year for next year, the year after, and so on.
Okay, so just I'm not sure that I understand what it means. So it says current year 80 to 105%. So that means that we will have contracted for 80 to 105% of our current year needs, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we look at this for 2018, we want to go into 2018 at least 80% hedged, 80 to 105% hedged. Then for year two, and as we look at this from this perspective, 2019, then we want to be between 70 to 100% hedged on our fixed price kind of market position.
In 2018, we want to be 70 to 100% hedged for 2019.
Yes.
I see. Okay. And then moving on there. So we're so decreasing, and then as you watch the energy market, you may change how you do that in order to take advantage of lower prices, or is that?
Exactly. Yeah. The basic idea is kind of a step down, a kind of a tiered system, so that next year we feel we are pretty well positioned for the energy that we have purchased, and then as you look farther out, we want to be less committed, so we don't overcommit now, so we can take advantage of opportunities as they arise between now and then.
Okay.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Answer the question. Great.
Yeah. So there's a risk that prices will drop, and there's a risk that prices will go up. So if the prices are going to go up, it's great that we have these fixed price contracts now. But if prices go down, what would we do? I guess we just have these commitments.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If prices do go down, I mean
or if there was some market event or some external event that caused prices to drop precipitously, we'd be...
Sure, then we are committed to, say, for example, in year three, right? So if we're looking now at 2018, the current year two is 19, and year three is 2020. We expect to be about at least half, probably 60 to 95% committed for that year currently. If prices were to fall, yes, we are 60% committed to those contracts that we do have. If prices do fall, then we can fill the other 5 to 40% with lower priced contracts or with lower price energy. And that's kind of the way that we hedge going forward. We certainly like the certainty of locking in, fixed prices and having that that certainty towards our rates. We'd hate to go into a year without being hedged, without that certainty, and then be shocked by an increase.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that and to think about how we might conceive of our reserve target in light of that. Okay, so if we're, what is our, this kind of goes back to the discussion we had during the retreat of our reserve target, and I know that's not the agenda item, but it's an interesting way to think of what are we putting reserves in for, and that's one potential thing, so that's why I want to bring that.
Sure, exactly. Thank you. All right, any other questions?
Sure, Greg Lyman.
Yeah, please.
On the same page 30 of 38, in preparation for tonight's meeting, I did go back and look at the IRP for 2017, and the IRP for 2017 shows us at 3,000. This graph that's on page 30, these are in gigawatt hours. 3,000 gigawatt hours is what our target purchase was in 2017, and frankly, it was a flat line 2017 through the next 10 years. We are now starting at 5,000. So that 2,000 gigawatt hour jump is not necessarily documented particularly well between the 2017 dates and now 2018 targets. And yet you've got a hedge of 80 to 105% following Sashi's set of comments on table 7. Can you talk, are we actually at 80 to 105%? Why are we at 105%? Why are we hedging up to 105%? And are we at 80 to 105% of 5,000 gigawatts since we were at some point during this year at 3,000 gigawatts planning? And obviously we anticipated the expansion, so I'm sure our procurement is addressing the expansion, but I'm just curious why we've got a starting point of 5 and not recognizing the starting point of 3 that we were at. So.
Sure, thank you for that question, and it's a very good question. So we do here have this chart. It's a little small, but it does begin in 2018 and then goes out through 2027. So that's where we see the 5,000, which is our estimated retail sales for next year. So as we are expanding to the new communities in April, they won't be the full year of additional sales. So that's why you see the kind of the partial increase between where we are now and where we expect to be for 2019 when we have the full year around 6,000 gigawatt hours a year. That's kind of the step up with the partial year of the enrollment. So that's the step up there. And then as to your question about where we currently stand, we'll say that the current year guidelines for 80 to 105% are certainly our targets, are our guidelines. And there is a note in the IRP in a separate section noting where we stand now, that we are slightly below that. Currently, we do not anticipate that really being an issue. We've working with the procurement team and Pacific Energy Advisors, planning to do a good bit of procurement here in the next couple months to fill that, to really bring us to within that current year target guideline.
And finally, on the guideline for 80 to 105%, would you be willing to explain why we go over 100% hedge, why we hedge prices to greater than 100%?
Sure. I think this is really looking at our physical position in the market. And so as we look at market prices, if we are, if we have uncertainty or we are risk averse in a certain month or a certain period, for example, in the summer months, in the summer, in the peak days or peak hours of those times, we may opt to be above 100% hedged, just so that if our load forecast is off by 2 or 3%, we're not exposed to market prices should they go higher. So that's kind of to give ourselves a little room there to go above 100% should we want to in those periods. I don't think it's our typical practice to over-hedge that physical position, but should we decide we'd like to, especially as I said, kind of summer periods or peak periods, we leave ourselves that ability to do so. Should we determine it to be wise?
Yeah, one of the presenters, I think it was yesterday, one of the presenters was talking at that ISO conference, was talking about the cost of power when the sun went down being almost 10 times what the cost of power is when the sun is up. And so there may be a practical reason to overhedge, to protect us from that peak hour pricing between sundown. I think the industry term is 1500 to 2200 military time, or something to that effect, or it's 1700 to 2200. But the goal being that that there is a practical need to overhedge, and that might be reflected in the RPS, or the IRP. Again, in preparation for tonight, I looked at Appendix A, which is the load resource table. It's on page 32 of 38 in a handout that was given to all of us.
Yes, and a note is that I believe that has yet to be updated. Nope, sorry, that has been updated. Thank you. There's a different resource table that hasn't been updated. This one is basically live.
It's closer. It's closer to the final target.
Exactly.
And I was comparing it to last year's Appendix A, and there's a line item, a couple line items in here that I would love to, and maybe I'm jumping ahead in your presentation, but to me, it's all about this risk that number 6 on this slide that you have up, about managing the market risks. There's a new line item from last year called Other Null Energy Under Contract. And I'm just curious, does that begin to touch on this risk? If not, we can save it for a later discussion.
I think we can address that now, and I'll speak to that to the best I can. John and Kirby, as you guys are the godfathers of this spreadsheet, happily defer to you as well, as you would like to speak to it as well. Yes, the other null, I believe, is our conventional purchases. So we see a lot of if we're in, sorry, and apologies for it being so small, but we've got 4 sections here in this table, Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 is contracted resources, and as you go from top to bottom, you'll see that the renewable resources there broken down by category 1, 2, and 3, a subtotal for renewables, and then large hydro. The other then are any conventional purchases we have that are system power or conventional that are non-renewable.
And last year it was, then if that is the case, it was titled last year conventional energy. What is less variable price contracted energy? So again, looking back at last year's in preparation for tonight, it looked like we ended up contracting for 3,700 gigawatt hours when our load was 3,000 gigawatt hours. So just curious, what did we do with all the extra power we purchased, and does it have anything to do with this hedging of this 105% and the hedging of risk?
Sure, it certainly is related to hedging market risk. As we go about this, we've got a number of things that we're trying to take into consideration, a number of targets and a number of goals. And we are jumping ahead here, but I think it's a good conversation to have. We look at each content category, right? We have our renewable targets, and those are section 2 of this Appendix A for in each year, how many gigawatt hours of renewable energy, categories 1, 2, and 3, and then hydro or carbon-free energy as well that we'd like to purchase. So we contract to meet those guidelines and those targets. And then in addition, we're looking at so that's one kind of side of procurement and side of resource planning. In addition, we've got to look at our load in the market and our exposure in the market. And so we've got to look at our load and what we'll be paying for it in the California markets. And because I think we've had a number of these discussions about how our solar doesn't always match when our customers are using resources. So if we do have positions that are not market positions, basically our load in the California markets, if we feel that the resources we have under contract will not, in a given hour, week, month, will not meet then our full load as it goes to market, that's kind of an exposure to the market. So then we may sign a hedge contract in addition to fill that position.
Yeah, and just add, so some of the, as Byron was saying, we look at the portfolio a couple of different ways. One of them is thinking about the attributes of the supply, and so that would be our renewable targets, our carbon-free targets. We're very concerned about the types of energy that's being delivered to the grid on our behalf, right? And then, but some of those contracts would be variable price contracts where we agree to pay the market price. Need to speak up a little bit? Where we agree to pay the market price plus a per kilowatt hour premium. So we refer to those as index plus contracts. You may have been exposed to some of those in various committees. So those types of contracts where we're buying renewable or we're buying hydrocarbon-free power, we still have price risk. So we're not managing our exposure to variable market pricing through that type of a contract. So we take another look at the portfolio and say, well, what is our overall level of price exposure? And where we have those types of index contracts, that's where in this table we're saying, you know, what are our total contracts? And then we say how much of that are index or variable price contracts, and what's left over would be our fixed price contracts. Those give us that hedge or that, you know, protection against variable market pricing. So that's the other perspective. That's the risk management perspective of managing the portfolio. So it's really, you know, how are we doing on our attributes, our targets, the characteristics of our power supply? That's one cut at it, and then the second cut is how are we doing in regards to managing the price risk? And so we'll fill that position with unspecified fixed price contracts, and that's the null power that's in this sheet.
So if I'm reading Appendix A correctly, that line item that says less variable price contracted energy, is that straight up on the hedge? Is that the hedge?
The less variable price, those would be the renewable and the carbon-free contracts that do not provide a hedge. Those would be the variable price, renewable or carbon-free contracts.
That don't provide a hedge.
That don't provide a hedge. So that's why we're taking them out here. This part of the spreadsheet is really saying we have, you know, X number of megawatt hours under contract, but not all of those contracts, you know, give us that price protection. So let's deduct those that don't, and then, you know, now we're looking at kind of the remainder for purposes of that risk management look at the portfolio.
So right now, granted, we are going through additional contracts for 2018, but right now, looking at this draft table, Appendix A, we have 3,300 gigawatt hours price protected against our load of 5,000 gigawatt hours.
That's right. And so we're below our planning guidelines, and of course, the bigger context here is that we're doubling the load in the program next year, right? So we're working on getting up to that 80% minimum. We're actively working that now, and we'll be there probably in steps. We're not going to do it all at once. We're not going to go to the market and buy everything we need for the next 3 years on one day, but we're going to be doing that over the course of the next 3 or 4 months.
So to get to that target, though, we're already at almost 5,000 gigawatt hours of total contracted energy. We would end up with another 20% contracted at fixed pricing. That, you know, at this hedge price. So we would end up with a lot more than 105% of our power purchased. We'd be at 120 or 125%. Looks like last year we were almost 22 or 24% above our power need, our load.
Right.
Is that typical?
Yeah, it is typical, and it's really, the reason we do it that way is because it's the way to minimize costs. It's the way to get the lowest cost for the power supply portfolio, and therefore have the lowest rates possible while hitting our various renewable and carbon-free targets. So so sort of more, I guess, directly, it's oftentimes cheaper to pursue those index plus types contracts for renewable power than it is to pursue a fixed price contract for renewable power. But then what happens when you have a number of those contracts, as I was saying earlier, you still have that exposure to market price variability. So you need to do something, and so you can fill that with a fixed price system energy purchase. And that it all just gets liquidated into the California Independent System Operators market at the end of the day. So while it looks like you have excess power, the power that you bought through that variable price contract, it really doesn't create a position, a financial position. You sort of pay X and you get paid X, right? So it's equivalent, what's going out is the same thing that's coming in through the KISO market.
I think just in terms of structuring the overall supply portfolio, one of the nice features of these index or variable price renewable energy deals is they're often kind of short-term in nature. And so, you know, in terms of the tenor of these different agreements that we have in place, those serve a very valuable purpose, right? Because if all the renewable contracts that you entered into in a highly renewable supply portfolio happen to be long-term, you'd be exposing yourself to a great deal of risk unnecessarily. And so, you know, that's one of the considerations that's being taken, and part of the resource planning effort here is how do we line up, kind of stack up these different contracts in a way where we have risk spread out over different periods of time. And so, you know, when you see these variable price renewable energy deals, know that a lot of them are shorter term in nature and really serve a key purpose in you know, managing risk and cost and a variety of other plan considerations.
Sashi McAtee, Mill Valley again. So is, and I would think time of day also is a consideration in there too, right? Like you want to make sure that some of the variable contracts are going to be filling in some time of day needs, or was that correct?
Well, I think, you know, you can do that a number of different ways, right? And some of it can be the delivery profile associated with whatever resource is being placed under contract. Some of it can just be the delivery terms that are spec'd out in terms of when that power will be delivered, irrespective of the fuel source that might be involved. So if I can buy unspecified power from the market, but I can let the seller know that I want that power delivered at a particular profile. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that are, you know, kind of interplaying with one another here. And again, I think that's kind of part of the challenge of dealing with a highly renewable supply portfolio, is that you're trying to, you know, piece these different you know, elements of the puzzle together in a way where you not only are considerate of when the power is being delivered, but also when you need it, what the costs are, how my risks are being spread out over time. And so, yeah, all those things are in play. I don't know if that.
That's what I wanted to know. And just since I'm not on the technical committee, and I was, thank you, Greg, for bringing up the previous report. I'm just kind of comparing it there to kind of see if I understood. So the that table that I brought up was just showing the fixed price contracts. This Appendix A shows the total, but then backs out the variable so that you have the total fixed price, and then gives you what we've got under contract, 65% now, against that goal of 80 to 105.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in this resource balance table is really kind of fundamental to the, you know, longer term planning exercise, and kind of gets a lot of attention during this process.
I don't know if this is a time to ask this, but I was going to ask about the portfolio content category 1, 2, and 3. If we move to a regional market, would the PCC 1 also include much further reaching?
Yeah, we don't know, but I love that idea, and yeah, I'm in favor of that. So yeah, I think that's the concept, right? Is that if we push these boundaries outward and we're kind of living in an interconnected grid that's more regional in nature, then theoretically some of these more distant power resources would be eligible as bucket 1.
So that increases what we are able to choose from, and potentially could potentially lower our cost basis.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the idea, is that, you know, that supply kind of curve shifts out, which would depress costs a little bit, which is great for, you know, folks like us that are trying to buy more renewable energy.
Where is that? Do we know? Is that's still a long-term discussion, the regionalization?
There was a lot of discussion about regionalization at the KISO symposium that Director Lyman attended. But at this point, no final decisions have been made. There's definitely a lot of discussion going on around the state and around the western region.
Thank you.
Yeah, Greg Lyman, to build on that, if I may. I touched on this comment earlier. Technology is the only way to harness distributed resources and local generation. And the speaker went on to say, coordinated dispatch across state lines and balancing regions will be really the way that will be the only way we can get renewables, relying on renewables, which is what we're trying to do, requires a much larger footprint than one state. And so you are touching exactly on the need for regionalization, and under regionalization, we wouldn't necessarily have to purchase 125% power to get 100% renewable, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're buying 120% power to get 100% renewable because of the variable pricing and the price hedging of renewables. But as the footprint of renewables gets larger, and we can include geothermal from other states or hydro from other states without penalties, because we are dealing with power on a much larger basis, we won't need to have to buy as much power to still achieve our renewable goals, because that's essentially what we're saying. If I understand what you're saying, is that we're buying more power than we need because of the price variables and to hedge our pricing, we're having to do this. And it's partly due to the fact that we're one state trying to deal with just one renewable power that we have plenty of, which is solar energy.
Yep, I think that's a really good summary. Thank you. Thanks for the questions, and thanks for digging in so quickly into the document and so thoroughly as well. So thanks for that, and thanks Don and Kirby and Greg for jumping in there as well.
Do you mind? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
If I jump into this is Andrew McCullough, City of San Rafael. Just in the context of long-term planning and fixed contracts and the risk associated with them, is in the event that there were an unexpected and significant departure of customers, are we buffered? Are we protected in any sense? For example, is there the equivalent of a PCIA charge that's assessed against their new service provider to protect us from the departure of those customers?
I think that's a good question. As far as a PCIA within the PCIA, I'll maybe let somebody else speak to that on the policy side. But just to go back to our guidelines there for how far out we hedge contracts. Really only being 60 to 70% hedged a year or two out. I think that is one of the mechanisms we use, so that even if 2 years out, someone or a community were to leave, it could be significant. 20% say we wouldn't yet be committed.
We do have in our annual rate setting process, a part of that rate setting process includes part of the recommendation that the board approves every year with our rate setting has been that our exit fees are set to 0. But we do have the authority to establish an exit fee greater than 0 if we choose to do that in the future. The thinking in the past has been that having that, first of all, it hasn't been necessary to have that sort of a fee because we tend to have a pretty high rate of customer retention and not a lot of movement in and out. And I think the board also didn't want to create a disincentive for folks to be part of the program. So that's the reason that we've kept that fee at 0. But every year there's an opportunity to revisit that decision at the board level.
Great, thanks, Don. And just one final follow-up as well on that 65% number for next year being below the 80. There is a note about that on here on page 23. So thanks for bringing it up. We have noted that we currently are at 65%. It's lower than we typically would be due to the expansion and kind of the work we've been doing. And just for context on that, so we're all comfortable, we received authority a few months ago to start procuring on behalf of new communities for next year. And if you look at, again, that resource table in Appendix A, you'll see that the renewable targets there, the open positions for renewables and carbon-free volumes are, if you'd seen them a couple months ago, they'd be much larger than they are now. So in Roman numeral 4, open positions, this is on page 32 in Appendix A again, portfolio content category 1, 2, and 3, and then hydro and carbon-free in the blue there, are all between 66 and 200 basically. So they were significant. They're significantly larger, and so we focused a lot of our work in the last few months on filling those positions. We've done signed a large number of hydro and renewable contracts in the last few months to prepare and be ready for expansion next year. So to kind of next up is the general supply. As we do want to prioritize renewables and carbon-free energy, we start there, and then as we discussed, we'll then fill open positions in our load as necessary. But we kind of want to prioritize renewable and carbon-free purchases as well. So that's why we kind of stagger it that way, and that's where we are in the process. Are there any other questions before we move on? Okay, fantastic. So let's then move on to key elements of the IRP. And I really think that the IRP, again, a document I inherited, so I'll give a lot of credit to, I think, Kirby and John, who have been integral to its preparation in previous years. But it flows pretty logically and kind of similar to this Appendix A table. So I do like the way that it all works, is that we start with our projected customer demand and energy needs. So that's kind of the first step, and you can see here that's the energy requirements in the Appendix A, Roman numeral 1. Just what do we need to supply next year and the next 10 years? So we start there with what do we think we need, and then number 2 is what do we currently have under contract. So that's basically the contracted resources there in Roman numeral 3. What do we have towards the final targets, the final goals that we'll need? Number 3 then is the open position, basically the difference between the two. So if 1 is all the energy we need to deliver next year and the next 10 years, 2 is what we currently have under contract, 3 then would be the difference between those that we still need to go procure. And then the 4th item here is then how we're going to do that. So that's really the overall flow, as you can see kind of here top to bottom in Appendix A, and then also throughout the document. It lines out what we need, what we have, what we need overall, what we have, then the difference that we need to procure, and then how we're going to do that. So that's really the flow of the document overall. Any questions about that before we keep moving? Okay. So our general procurement targets at MCE, we've got a number of them, and some of them have finer points kind of broken up within the overall renewable targets. But the main ones here are that our greenhouse gas target is to be 100% greenhouse gas free by 2025. That was a goal that we implemented a year or 2 ago, and we have been working steadily from 75% last year up to 100% in 2025. So the math works out pretty well that we can basically just aim to add 3% of greenhouse gas free energy per year. So we're at 78% for next year for our 2018 targets. And as I showed you earlier in Appendix A, the resource balance table, that we are only 66 gigawatt hours away from doing that next year. So we are very close already to that target and feel quite good about where we are. Yes?
Sashi McEntee, Mill Valley. So if we did reach that goal by 2025, does that mean we would no longer have a light green product? We would just be essentially 100% deep green?
Light green is the renewable portion. So this is the green carbon-free or greenhouse gas-free. So we still may have a slight portion, I guess, of the portfolio that would be non-renewable but carbon-free. So the light green, dark green difference there would be, minimal.
Sorry, what's something that's non-renewable but carbon-free?
Typically, it's large hydroelectricity and theoretically nuclear, depending on how you feel about it.
Right.
And obviously, we don't procure nuclear, but technically speaking. Yeah, and the hydroelectricity has been, obviously determined that any small hydro, if it's from a facility under 30 megawatts, then it's considered renewable. If it's above 30 megawatts, if it's large hydro, then it's non-renewable. I think that was as much political as environmental at the time it was decided. But.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So our next procurement target, again, none of these are new. We're just kind of progressing along towards targets that we've previously set. But we have a target to be, in addition to 100% greenhouse gas free, 80% renewable by 2025. And so it really is this kind of speaks to the question as well about the difference between light green and dark green. In 2025, if we are 100% renewable, if we're 80% renewable, the deep green service would be 100%, so the difference there would be a 20% renewable number. So maybe the premium between the two would be lessened, but we're all, if both are driving toward higher renewable percentages, I think everyone's happy, so everybody wins. And our current target for, there's a typo, but in 2018 we plan to be 57% renewable. That shouldn't be greenhouse gas free, probably a copy paste error, but that's 57% renewable is our target for next year. And as you can see from Appendix A, on those targets, we are pretty close to those as well. We've got a few contracts left to sign that we plan to do later this year, maybe early next. But we certainly see no reason that we won't be able to hit 57% renewable next year. And then our third target here is breaking down breaking down some of the renewable energy targets to have 25 megawatts of local renewable energy capacity by 2021. So we're doing that a number of ways, and we feel, again, very good about where we are towards that goal. That includes our feed-in tariff program, which is a 15 megawatt target available, and we've got, I believe, 4 megawatts of that online already, and we've had a flurry of activity and applications to our feed-in tariff program in the last few weeks as well. So that's moving quickly towards that 15 megawatt target. We also have the Redwood landfill, which is just north of us here in Novato. That's another 4 megawatts in our service area. And then, of course, the Solar One facility in Richmond is progressing very nicely and should be online by the end of the year. That's a 10.5 megawatt solar project. So we definitely think we're tracking to and beyond 25 megawatts, but that's our goal, and we're maintaining that and certainly hope to exceed it.
So I didn't add all that up. Barbara Kohler, Fairfax, where will we be by the end of this calendar year as far as megawatts of local renewable?
Sure. Don't quote me on it, but my understanding is we've got 10.5 at Solar One in Richmond, and that will be online by the end of this year. Redwood landfill is another 4 megawatts, and then the feed-in tariff program has about 4 megawatts as well. It's already online.
About 18.5.
Yeah, right around there.
So we're doing well.
We're doing very well. Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll keep moving. These are some of the potential changes that are very quickly becoming changes in the draft. Kind of basically the delta from last year's IRP to this year's IRP in as far as policies that we're doing here at MCE, and large changes. They're basically, as we update the IRP every year, any changes to policies or our targets or goals, those are reflected. And then, of course, we've got all of the numbers that we update, as you can see in Appendix A. Those are kind of the numerical updates, but the text, we'll go through those changes here. Obviously, a pretty big change is our service area expanding as we welcome new communities next year. So that's been a pretty big shift in a lot of the, as we noted in the targets and numbers here. So that's going to be April 2018. We've got a few things as well on the regulatory front. None of them really should impact too much of our procurement day to day, but certainly are things that we need to keep in mind. AB Assembly Bill 1110, there's a that AB 1110 is an emissions factor calculation methodology bill. It's still under implementation, so we're still kind of awaiting the final word on that, but we note it here in the IRP as something to keep in mind basically as we go about our procurement. There's a resource adequacy filing or proceeding at the CPUC that introduces a new kind of resource adequacy methodology called the effective load carrying capacity. So we're getting pretty far into the weeds here, but just we do discuss that as well as we go to our resource adequacy numbers. Some of the resource adequacy capacity that we receive from renewable resources has been reduced under this new capacity, which is the kind of effective load carrying capacity. So that's reflected in the IRP as well. And then SB Senate Bill 350, which introduced the 50% renewable target in California, is also reflecting this as well. So again, shouldn't impact us too much as we're already beyond 50%, but we note it here, and certainly there's some of the finer points and the nuance of the bill that we'll comply with noted here as well. And then a few changes here in procurement strategy. So I want to make you aware of these. None of them I don't think we consider to be too major, but again, these are the main changes in our strategies. The first is that we may consider direct procurement of energy storage facilities. Again, it's nothing binding, but it's a note that in the past we've talked about energy storage, and we have a mandate to, now with the expanded load and expanded service area, to have about 10 megawatts of energy storage online by 2024 or so. Previously, in discussing that, we were talking about working with customers to strategically site energy storage where it benefited customers within our service area. In addition to that, now we may consider energy storage as well. So again, we're still very early in the, in the kind of the thinking about that, and really thinking about how we would procure energy storage, whether it be sited, co-located with renewable resources, or whether it would just be a standalone facility. But this is one of the things we'll be considering as we move toward that 10 megawatt target. Yeah.
Sasha McIntyre, Mill Valley. So when you say 10 megawatts, is that per year?
No, just a total 10 megawatt target.
Okay, so out of a 5 terawatt need, is this little mini 10, you're just saying, we're just putting a toe in the water. Is there a goal of being able to manage resources in a better, if we have more access to storage?
Yeah, I think storage provides a lot of potential benefits. A few of us have been taking a pretty hard look at storage this year. A couple of us attended a conference in San Diego at the Energy Storage North America conference. Have been having a lot of discussions with developers as well. It's no secret that there are a million things storage can do. I mean, many different applications, and the catchwords are value stacking, and how can you take value here and stack it with value there and make it make sense. So with all those potential applications of storage, I think we are kind of digesting them and happy to explore them. And as we've kind of done that, realize that direct procurement of energy storage may be something we consider. I think we want it to obviously be cost effective, right? That's the main goal here. But as we do it, we'll consider a number of different applications, one of which may be directly managing our supply portfolio if we co-locate it with one of our resources, or we could have a standalone battery somewhere where there's more capacity on the grid, somewhere that effectively would help us manage our resources but not directly co-located.
And it does seem, from the little that I know about what's going on in energy storage, from the few Power Association of Northern California luncheons that I've been to, it does seem like it could be completely a game changer too. So given that we don't know that, I assume that every year as you hedge out with these fixed price contracts, you're keeping an eye on that and making sure that we're not going to be kind of left hanging if the whole game changes and storage. If someone creates some new fabulous storage capability that allows you to move energy in and out really quickly and effectively. So that's just something to keep. I assume you guys are keeping an eye on for the future.
Yes, very, very much so. And tracking different technologies, different applications, and trying to think best we can, in our free time, how we can best integrate it into our portfolio. Certainly is exciting. We certainly do see lithium-ion costs dropping quickly. Similar to where we were with solar 5 or 10 years ago. And so we're aware of that as well. It's still. It may be cost effective in certain applications. We're not sure. And there's a lot of speculation. And I think in a lot of places it does make sense as costs continue to drop, assuming they do. It'll become more cost effective in more applications. So certainly exciting, and I think it's something that, as we've got a few years still until our target or our mandate, is required. It's a fun time now to be kind of exploring all the possibilities, and to still have a couple of years really before we have to make any big decisions about it.
Yeah, I would just add that I think the big issue is price, and we've been keeping a close eye on where prices are. A lot of folks are anticipating some pretty dramatic decreases in the coming year or two. So we're really looking forward to that. And I think for now, piloting these on a small scale makes a lot of sense so that we gain experience. But we have some, because we do not manage transmission and distribution systems, the value stacking isn't as easy for us as it is for an entity that does. So we'll be looking for prices to come down and being able to scale up that technology within the next year or two.
And customers will also, more customers will be having, over time we'll have batteries, solar customers will have batteries. It could also change what energy metering looks like. So as those things trickle down into the consumer market, there'll be a lot of different changes that we'll see.
That's right, and as a reminder, we have a battery storage rate right now. So folks that get a battery installed behind their meter can be part of that program and get a $10 a month incentive to allow us to charge and discharge the battery once per day.
Wow, okay, thank you.
Greg Lyman, El Cerrito, and Director McAtee, it sounded like you went to the conference, because certainly a lot of these topics were discussed. Solar storage type projects were discussed at length. The keynote speaker yesterday for lunch said the same thing as our public speaker earlier today about battery costs dropping precipitously over the last decade. And so certainly for me as part of TechCom, where policy where this document will be influenced the most, we'd certainly like to see our energy storage discussion maybe a little more robust, given in light of what Executive Director Weitz has said tonight. And it also potentially would allow us to, again, going back to not procuring 130% or 125% of power, because we're hedging our bets around solar power. And one of the themes of the conference was, let's turn that solar power, that surplus of solar power that's a dividend during the day, into a stacked asset, or whatever the right word is, for our customers at, from sundown to 10 o'clock. So we'd certainly like to potentially think about maybe making the language, energy storage language on page 25 or 38 a little more robust.
Sure. Thank you for that comment. And there are, as we structure the IRP, there are energy storage is addressed in a couple of different areas. First, kind of in the overall resource needs, and then secondly in the resources, current contracted resources. So there is a discussion of it, and apologies for the late draft. You're joining us in the drafting process of the IRP, so you're with us here in real time as we finalize it. But we, on I believe page 12, page 13 or 14 there, there's a 12 through 14 is kind of a discussion of our distributed energy resources, including electric vehicles and energy storage, demand response, and energy efficiency. So that's kind of, we do describe it in a little more depth there, kind of thinking about the current pilots that we have in place and how we think about it as well. So thank you for that comment. Any other questions or comments before we move on here? Okay, so we addressed the first procurement strategy. The second here is calling out our direct preference for renewable and carbon-free hedge contracts. So this was a very timely discussion we had earlier that kind of leads into the second bullet here under number 3, is that as we think about hedging our market position, or our what we call the physical position in the market, we do obviously have a preference for renewable and carbon-free resources. So calling that out here, and it kind of reflects a lot of the work that we've done in the last few months as well to target those resources for hedge purposes with fixed price contracts, both renewable and carbon-free. Really, in the last year, I think Greg Brem, our Director of Power Resources, who's not here, but his idea about a year ago to start looking for these hydroelectric contracts for hours 17 to 22 was a really good one. It's something we pursued. We're trying to drive the market toward these atypical, what have historically been atypical shaped contract hours in the past, kind of on peak and off peak, or daytime and nighttime. Basically, it was kind of a 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. type thing. Now we really are doing what we can to sign contracts just for those evening hours. So that's kind of called out in the hedging section as well. Just to make it known that we do, as we go to fill these positions, we're not just dealing with system power or conventional energy. We really do as well pursue those carbon-free and renewable assets before going to anything that's fossil fuel. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the final note here is that we're considering again and have signed some contracts with and propose a minor change here in kind of our portfolio accounting to include asset controlling supplier resources as carbon-free. So they're, again, we're diving straight into the weeds here, but asset controlling suppliers are portfolios of resources, and there are only 3 of them that are currently certified with the California Air Resources Board that are largely hydroelectric. They're a portfolio of resources that have a lot of hydroelectric power, but maybe have other resources sprinkled in here or there as well. So we can get into one of the appendices that does call these out specifically. So I'll do that now if we go down to Appendix 1, as we talk about asset controlling suppliers. These have very low emissions factors. You can see Bonneville Power Administration, PowerX, and Tacoma Power are the 3 ACS, asset controlling suppliers, that have large hydro fleets that may have other, basically, my understanding is that it's a large portfolio of hydro resources with some natural gas resources as well, or one or two sprinkled in. So they have very, very low, as you can see, very low emissions rates here. And for reference, we've included some some others here on the left, the geothermal, the biomass, and the natural gas combined cycle. So you can see this is orders of magnitude less, but not quite zero. So we call them ultra-low or hyper-low GHG contracts. So for portfolio planning purposes, this note that we've got here and the potential change is that because those are virtually zero, we include those in our GHG-free category. We do reflect the emissions from those resources in our emissions calculations and our emissions factor, which is to keep it simple, as we had to find a place for those contracts in our kind of portfolio planning documents. We include those in GHG-free. So there's a note there with a kind of a change that we're making as we pursue some of these ACS resources and need to account for them somewhere. Any questions about that? Okay, so we'll wrap up here. I realize we're dragging on a little bit, so we'll keep moving. The rest is just kind of a status updates on where we are, and we've already we dove in pretty well to some of the details already, so I don't we need to go through them specifically. We've seen Appendix A, and then there are a number of tables throughout the draft that's been provided to you that really update where we are towards a number of the different targets that we have, both overall renewable and then carbon-free, and then within the renewables, of course, content categories 1, 2, and 3. So the appendices here in the presentation that you have are last year's tables, as we did prepare this slide deck a few days ago and didn't have the final draft wrapped up yet, so that those are representative from last year. The draft, though, those are updated tables that we plan to publish in the next couple weeks. We can go through them if you'd like, but I don't know that we need to. Are there any questions before we move on, or anything else about integrated resource planning at MCE? Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Don and item 6, I believe.
And last call for questions in Lafayette on the integrated resource plan.
Doesn't look like it.
Good.
We can move on to item 6, if you're ready. Item 6. So we're going to hear from Justin Kudo on MCE's billing overview for special customer groups. And this is an item that was requested by Director Eddie Bersan from Concord at our executive committee meeting a couple weeks ago. And so we put this presentation together for you all to hear about how we handle billing for certain customer groups. And I think this will be useful, especially to our new board members as we're going through the enrollment process in the new communities. You may get questions from your constituents and customer groups, and hopefully this will help you answer some of those questions.
All right, thank you very much, Dawn. So, I'm going to cross the mic here. Thank you very much. Is this coming through now? Louder. I'll just pull it directly to my face, thank you. So I'm going to be going over some of the more common California statewide as well as PG&E programs which our customers utilize. My review is going to be fairly high level. Please let me know if you'd like me to take a deeper dive into any of these programs and how we serve these accounts. So just a brief overview of the main programs that we serve between net energy metering, care, medical baseline, and balance payment plan, all of which I'll be going over in more depth here as we go through the slides. That's about 20% of our customers that are served by some sort of special billing program, usually a discounted rate or a special arrangement. Net metering, I think most of us are pretty familiar with. That's referring to customers who have on-site self-renewable generation. Solar is the most common, but it can include other types of generation. CARE and FARA are two programs that are available that provide discounted rates for low-income households, and I'll go over what that acronym is as well. Medical Baseline is a program that's used for customers who run life support equipment in their house, so they get a discounted rate for that. And the balance payment plan is a program that provides a sort of bill stabilization for customers. We serve about 244,000 accounts overall. Our opt-out rate is about 17.5% right now, so keep that number in mind as we go through some of these slides. You'll get some of the high key points on our participation rates in each of these programs. There are a couple of key PG&E programs that are not served by MCE, and I want to go through those as well. Smart rate and peak day pricing are programs you may hear about. They are a certain type of demand response program that's offered by PG&E. We don't receive the billing data from PG&E that's necessary for us to offer an analogous program on our side, and that's something that we are working on remedying as we continue to get more access to smart meter data. Solar Choice is a PG&E generation service option where instead of the main generation supply, you'd receive your power to be met with 100% or 50% renewable energy, very similar to comparable programs that MCE offers on its side. The economic development rate is a rate that is not available to our customers in full. It's available in part. It's a incentivized rate to try to retain businesses that are otherwise looking to leave the state of California. It's a program that's being reevaluated by the Commission towards the end of this year. As far as I'm aware, talking with PG&E, there has not been any interest in the program within our service area. And the last one that you may have heard, I know some of our member agencies have had questions about it, as well as certain other municipalities. The bill credit transfer program is kind of a hybrid of net energy metering and a feed-in tariff. That's one that is exclusive to PG&E bundled service. So getting to the key programs here, were there any questions about those other programs I just mentioned? Right, getting to the main programs that we do serve. Net energy metering, a lot of people will associate it with rooftop solar. It's not just limited to solar, it also does include things like on-site small wind generation. It can include biogas facilities for farming sites. Net metering is the bill mechanism that allows customers to get credits when they generate extra electricity and push it up the grid, and then use those credits when they don't produce enough electricity for themselves at their household or their business. We serve over 11,000 accounts on net metering right now. It's almost 5% of our accounts. And these are very complicated accounts. There's a tremendous amount of billing work that does go into serving them. There's also a lot more time that's needed for customer service of these accounts. One thing that we've run into with PG&E is they were not able to do the tracking of credits for our customers for our credit program, so we had to do that ourselves. We do track all of our NEM customers' credits, all the credits they accumulate and the charges they have, give them a summary on each of their bills of where they are and how their solar array is performing on their bills. We do have a higher opt-out rate, as you may note here. Our opt-out rate is about 28% for our net metering customers. When we talk to customers, the two responses we usually get are one, that they feel they're doing enough already, that they are producing renewable power on their household. They don't need a provider necessarily that's also providing extra renewable power. And the other thing that we hear is that customers find PG&E's true-up system, their billing for net metering customers, is already pretty complex, and adding another provider adds another layer of complexity that they aren't interested in having. The balance payment plan is another program of interest to customers. There's only a few customers on it. We have about 3% of our customer base is on balance payment plan. Comes out to just over 7,000 accounts. The opt-out rate for customers on balance payment plan is actually slightly lower than our general opt-out rate across our total population. Customers who are on balance payment plan get an estimated bill from PG&E. Every couple months, PG&E will look at their charges and they'll recalculate and try to average out what they guess the bill will be. The effect for the customer is that they have roughly the same bill month after month after month. This was a really useful program when we used to have more severe tiering pricing signals coming from PG&E. One thing that's changed over the last couple of years is we've had the residential rate reform. And doing that, that softened a lot of the tiering pricing signals. That means that customers, it used to be customers who would have low usage would get a substantial discount, and customers with higher usage would get a substantial surcharge. Now the discount is a little bit smaller, the surcharge is a little bit smaller, and that means that customer bills are less volatile from month to month. This is a program that we've looked at offering. The big challenge for us is whether or not we could align our recalculation date with PG&E's recalculation date, because that balance amount is getting recalculated every 3 months, and we're not confident that PG&E would provide us sufficient data to make sure those dates line up. Both Sonoma Clean Power and MCE have looked very closely at this and really tried to gauge what sort of feedback we're getting from customers. We get about 1 call per month asking if this is something that we offer. However, because PG&E charges remain balanced through balance payment plan when the customer's with us, that's taking care of most of the volatility of their bill. That's taking care of tiering adjustments, that's taking care of gas charges, and they're still adequately served through this program in a way that keeps their bill stable. Any questions?
No, go ahead.
Great. CARE and FARA are the big low-income discount programs that are offered in the state of California. I accidentally here have federal programs, and these are state programs. CARE is an alternative, California Alternative Rates for Energy. FARA is the Family Electric Rate Assistance Program. Both of these are income-based programs which provide an approximately 30% discount on your utility bill. This credit is applied regardless of the service provider that's chosen. It's applied through PG&E charges to our customers or to their customers that are bundled as well if customers opt out. The credit is equal. However, that said, we do hear from a lot of customers that they think that this is a PG&E program. It's often marketed, particularly in our area, as a PG&E program, and customers are under the impression that they will lose their CARE discount if they switch service providers. That's something we've really worked on. We've worked with a lot of the CARE program administrators in our current service area to try to make sure they're aware that CARE discount applies regardless of if the customer takes power from MCE or not. But we do have a little bit higher opt-out rate as a result because customers think they'll lose that discount.
I can, this is Eddie Bursan, if I can interrupt. What is the approximate income rate at which CARE or FURA kicks in, they can apply for it?
That's a great question. So the income rate is based on federal poverty guidelines. FARA applies for, I believe it's 200 to 250% of the federal poverty guideline, and then CARE would apply if it's below 200%. For a family of 4, that's about $61,000 is the threshold.
How much is their discount?
In San Francisco? Oh, is there discount? Excuse me, I misheard that. The discount is about 30% on utility bills.
Thank you.
Barbara Kohler, Fairfax. It would be really nice if we had something really short and sweet on our website about this. When I worked at the Air District, we tried to help people with all these various programs. As I was running the wood burning enforcement program, and people were angry because their bills were high, etc. So I put together sort of this short cheat sheet on all the programs that would be available, and it seems to me like if we had something, maybe we do, but I haven't seen on our website, that was a really simple place to go, because even on PG&E's website, it's very hard to figure out all the different programs that you can apply for. If we had something really simple, maybe there's a way, to point people to that, because I'm sure the explanation takes a long time too. Or do we have that and I've just been ignorant about what's on the website?
We do have reference to the CARE program and where people can sign up for it on our website. I do think that as we've gone through a lot of different versions of our website, it might not be as prominent as it has been in the past, and something that I'll certainly pass on. We'll take a look at and try to see if we can improve.
Well, I'm thinking of this in the context of the medical baseline too, because when you go to PG&E's website, there's a whole lot of programs where you can save money, and I think there's more than these two. but I think Dawn was gonna say something, because I'm just thinking just one place just to go for if you need income assistance or something, or if you need assistance with your bill. What were we
Yeah,
gonna
it's
say,
pretty
Dawn?
easy to find. I'm actually looking at it right now, so it's under
Right.
rates and billing. So if you go to our homepage and then look at rates and
Okay.
billing, there's 3 big blocks that talk about discount rates, net
Great.
energy metering rates. I think it's pretty easy to find.
Okay, well, darn it. But, good luck, thank you. Thanks for pointing that out.
Never mind.
So yeah, our big challenge has been customers who think that they need to opt out of MCE to retain their discount. We've really been trying to work with a lot of folks like Community Action Marin, who communicate with customers about applying for the care discount and trying to get them signed up for it. That's been really a good relationship for us. We've really improved the messaging around the care discount, and that's something that we're going to have to make sure that we're doing as we go through our upcoming enrollment as well. The medical baseline rate is another discounted rate. As we discussed earlier, customers are incentivized to conserve electricity by getting discounted rates if they use less electricity, and having to pay surcharges if they have higher usage. The problem with that system is some people can't help using electricity. Some people need to run life-saving equipment in their household. So that's what medical baseline is there for. It creates a much higher threshold for customers to start paying higher rates. It's utilized by about 6,500 accounts in our service area. The opt-out rate in these customers is very high. It's about 33%. And that's for the same reason as CARE, where customers think that this is a PG&E program and that they have to stay with PG&E to get that discount. That's not the case. Customers still get medical baseline with MCE service. In fact, medical baseline customers are currently exempt from the PCIA, so that means that their bills are certainly lower with MCE service.
So I have a question, Tom, about Richmond. So with these discounted programs, it seems like essentially we're losing money on these, right? I mean, why would we necessarily want to increase the number of customers utilizing them because we're selling them power at a discounted rate?
So the discounts that are provided on these rates are done through distribution, transmission rates, other non-generation parts of the bill.
Thank you.
And it's provided through funding that's state mandated, so it doesn't come out of the MCE budget.
Okay.
Any questions about these rates?
Any more questions from Lafayette? No? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Can we go back to the net metering? This is Ellen O'Donnell from Tiburon. The opt-out rate of 28% is really sort of disappointing. Most of the people that put solar panels on their roofs, which is, I presume, over 90% of this net metering energy profile, are pretty sophisticated about price per kilowatt hour and whatnot. And I'm wondering, have we done enough to reach out to market to them? Because I think those would be the ideal customers that MCE should be going after and probably really take a big swipe out of that 28%. So I'll just repeat what I'm saying. The 28% opt-out rate for net energy metering customers, to me, seems a little disappointing. Most of the customers that have net energy metering are rather sophisticated about their bill, their price per kilowatt hour, their terms of service, and those are the type of customers I think that we can kind of appeal to. And I'm wondering what we could do to market for that and try to reverse that particular number.
Yeah, I really think the biggest challenge for us is how they currently have a certain billing system with PG&E that's billed on an annual basis. And we're settling out their charges on a monthly basis. And so there's an incongruity there that makes billing more complex. The funny thing is we talk about these kinds of things with PG&E. We're in conversations with them in one of their working groups about their net metering bill design. And PG&E tells us the thing that they hear from customers is that they prefer to have the monthly settlement that MCE offers, and they wish that PG&E would offer settlement on a monthly basis versus an annual basis. We do it a little bit differently, and that's one of the tricky issues for us. The other one is the timing of the enrollment. PG&E resets their annual bills, and sometimes that's not the best time of year for people to have that true up occur. That's something that we really try to do a lot of messaging for. We try to do special outreach, additional letters to customers that we're enrolling to say, if you want to opt out now and come back later on in the process, later on in your true up cycle, then that's an option available to you. And so as part of that extra communication, this is one of the things that goes on. A lot of these customers, at the end of the day, though, are customers where their energy bills come up zero every year, and they just said, you know, my bill's $0 anyway. If I'm not buying anything from PG&E or
Yeah, but there's a back, this is Ed O'Donnell again from Tiburon, there's a back side of that. We're getting the power. We're procuring more of our renewable sources. It's just another couple thousand customers right there with solar power that would go towards our power procurement strategies. So there's, even though they may not have large bills because they're netting out to zero, there's an opportunity for, for larger renewable power coming in, and those are customers for battery storage and things like that. There's a lot of tentacles that evolve off of this particular type of program.
Yeah, one other thing I'd like to throw into the discussion here, because I think it's a really interesting topic, is first of all, the folks that have solar on their rooftop, if they're generating more than they use, we do pay them a surplus for that.
I understand.
We pay them a little extra. We don't actually get to count that energy, though, as part of our renewable portfolio, because we don't have the renewable attributes that go with that renewable power. It really just nets against our load, so it reduces our overall need to buy energy. So that's just an interesting nuance that folks might not realize. Okay. The other thing, and this is something that we'll be likely discussing at a technical committee meeting soon, is that it's becoming, there are a lot of discussions happening around currently where we're seeing so much solar on the grid that the solar is becoming less valuable. And sometimes in the year, it's actually a liability to have too much solar because the value of that solar is dropping and sometimes even becomes negative in the middle of the day when there's a lot of solar across the state. Our net energy metering customers are getting fully compensated at a pretty high premium no matter what. And so that those curtailment costs and the negative pricing impacts that we feel as an agency are not being passed along to customers. And so many argue that the net energy metering customers, in many of which are folks that have been able to afford putting solar on their rooftops, they're being subsidized to some degree by the rest of the customers. And so one of the things that we might be discussing soon is how we might be able to make sure that those benefits, those subsidies are being shifted a little bit more towards our low-income customers through our solar rebate program that really incentivizes low-income customers to get rooftop solar and create a little more equity around the issue. So these are all things that will be good to explore in greater detail, but I think you're raising some really good points.
Also, I mean, regardless, in addition to that, you want to encourage people to lower their greenhouse gas footprint, and that's a large element. And when we can see that the tsunami of electric vehicles is going to hit in 5 years, 10 years, with all major companies rolling out electric vehicles, I think we ought to be encouraging even more rooftop solar at this time. I know it creates problems with the duck curve and the supply portfolio of renewable power and whatnot, but as we've been talking about, there's a lot of technologies that people are working on for battery storage, and we're promoting those particular technologies. You, Don, even mentioned earlier that we'd love to have more of our net metering customers take on battery that we can charge and discharge. So I actually think this is something that we ought to continue to pursue. And when I see things like the 28% opt-out rate, I find it a little disappointing. I think we could do a little better in that regard. And I think there's lots of reasons beyond just rate equity among customers and sort of subsidizing more wealthy customers. There's a lot of other issues around this, and I think we ought to explore this more.
I have a follow-up question, Elizabeth Patterson, City of Benicia. So, can you explain why you can't claim that power that is on the rooftop?
Yeah, so in order to, for the renewable energy that we purchase, it actually needs to get transferred through a system called Regis, which Kirby can talk all night about if you want to hear more about it. But it's a becoming registered with Regis is an undertaking that a residential customer and even a school probably wouldn't go through in order to sell the green attributes of their system. In many cases, folks that install solar, they want to claim that green energy and they don't want to sell the rights for someone else to claim that green energy. It's not reasonable for us to necessarily claim that clean energy without having those green attributes transferred to us. So that's really the reason for it. Kirby, do you want to add any more to that?
No, I think you hit it right on the mark. Yeah.
Well, to be persistent, sorry about the time, the evening for that, is if there's a surplus there, it's an accounting issue to me, and you can account for the fact that they had surplus power there, therefore they added power in the system, and since the transmission is fewer miles, there's actually power saved on that. So I don't understand why we couldn't pursue. I suppose it has something to do with regulations, besides your own independent decision-making on how to deal with surplus power from rooftop solar.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly some truth to what was said, but I think the scale is so, micro in most regards that, the accounting for that throughout the utility industry just becomes very, very tedious. And I know that there have been a lot of discussions and even, I think, some regulatory proceedings focused on that issue, but for the time being, that there isn't any cost consideration regarding, any avoided transmission of electricity on the bulk electric system. And just the way it works right now is if we have surplus produced by certain end customers, we just have to buy less, for the group. And in that sense, it also drops our renewable energy requirements under the RPS. Of course, we're well above that, so it really doesn't matter. But yeah, I guess it's kind of an outstanding issue, for lack of a better expression.
This is Dave Trotter from Moraga. And Don, I guess this question is for you. When I look at these various programs and I see the opt-out rates, and we talk about the complexity in trying to adjust those, I guess I have a couple, I think, but I hope are simple questions. One is it the policy of this board to try to reduce opt-out rates generally across the board? If that's the case, then I think the key thing is to make the marketing a little bit less complex. The goal ought to be simplicity. And I'm hearing from our staff that these are complex issues. I don't doubt it. I think the direction of this board ought to be, we'll try to break that down and make it as simple as we can in all these categories so that we do a better job in the future of reducing opt-out and increasing participation in MCE.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that is the objective of the agency, and to keep things as simple as possible and make it easy for customers to stay with MCE. So that's definitely our objective, and we'll continue to work on that.
I think this is a marketing exercise. I wish I were a marketing expert. I'm not. I don't know what the right strategy here is. I just think we ought to be striving to, in terms of, not only existing jurisdictions, but the ones that are coming on stream in April, to be marketing to these folks who have, for example, rooftop solar, say, providing the same benefits as PG&E, and you'll be doing more for the environment if you opt in as opposed to opting out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the opt-out rates, among the general population is, the opt-out rates are much, much lower than with these highlighted programs. And I think it speaks to the, as Justin was explaining really well, folks do make the assumption that these are PG&E only programs, and we do need to do a lot of outreach to make sure that folks hear our message rather than making a decision where they may not have all the information at their fingertips. So I think that, and we've seen similar patterns with all the other community choice aggregation programs where you'll see the same subset of customers with slightly higher opt-out rates due to the confusion and the assumption that these are PG&E programs. So our website and our marketing is definitely tailored. I think one of the things that we've started doing recently is when we do our outreach letters, our enrollment notices, which will start going out in January, we're able to tailor them to specific customer classes. So our medical baseline customers will get a specialized message that talks about that specific program, rather than getting a generic message that talks about every program. We have a specialized mailer for our net energy metering customers, and that helps as well as the marketing on the website and the outreach that we do in communities. But you all can help in communicating this information to your constituents, and please let us know if there's more information we can provide. We have a lot of one-pagers and kind of glossy, easy to read handouts that we can share with your local government offices to have on hand during the enrollment period. We think that'll be really helpful.
And I just say, let's keep the message simple and powerful.
Yeah, and I'd note that since we started doing specialized outreach for customers who have care, customers who have NEM and so forth, we've really seen a lot of these more inflated opt-out rates drop significantly in recent phases. That's a really good change to our marketing that we think has been very effective.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that.
All right, then just to wrap up here on net energy metering, one of the things that we're looking to see changes on very soon is we are working with PG&E on what their bill formatting looks like to net metering customers and making sure that their messages, as was just requested, that their message is simplified about how net metering works and that they get a clear explanation of how their charges will work as CCA customers rather than generic messages which PG&E currently is providing. We're also looking at the balanced payment plan, and we're continuing to keep an eye on how many inquiries we have about that and if our current system continues to work or if there's any need to tweak that as we continue to provide service. And then lastly, the medical baseline, one thing that is changing, and I'm sure this is something that Beth will talk about a little bit more, is the exemption for the PCIA that's there. That's something that PG&E is currently contesting and will be hashed out during Q1 and Q2 of next year. But it would have a fiscal impact to customers who are on that rate right now. It would be approximately $1 million impact to our existing service area and would be an even larger impact, of course, after we look at the Contra Costa expansion. Any other questions?
So in general, Greg and I were this is Emmett O'Donnell from Tiburon. We were just adding up the numbers, and so it's about 25% of the total customer base that is on some sort of a discount or a NEM program. Is that correct?
I would say it's a little bit less than that, and the reason why is there's overlap between these programs. A lot of medical baseline customers are also on care, and may even have NEM on top of that.
Just curious.
Ray Whitney, Sausalito. I don't want to send us backwards, but something that caught my eye on the unserved programs, unserved by MCE, is the smart rate and peak day pricing. And you indicate that we haven't established analogous programs because we do not yet have adequate metering data access. Now, metering data access used to be a topic of conversation at this board some years ago, nearly every meeting. So at some point, maybe this is too long a conversation for now, in light of the hour, but at some point, I think the board should be updated on where we're at with that, because, I mean, this is seems to me to be a critical issue.
Yes, it is a critical issue, and it really came to light last week when we needed real-time outage information in our impacted fire communities. The smart meters were not able to provide the real-time information we needed. So we now have a couple of reasons to really bring this to escalate this issue, and we'll be doing that through some meetings in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much. That brings us to regulatory and legislative policy update.
Okay, so we are going to hear from Beth Kelly, General Counsel, on what is going on, kind of the lay of the land on the regulatory and legislative front. So take it away, Beth.
Can everybody in Lafayette hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, okay, and let me know if you can't. So I know that you recently got a legislative update from Shalini Swaroop at the board retreat. What I'm going to touch on is something slightly different. I am going to give more of an overview on themes. So first I'm going to discuss some of the regulatory trends and status, and I'm going to give a quick legislative update and look ahead to the coming year. So with that, I'm going to start by showing an exceedingly complicated diagram, and I apologize for that. Especially when you're looking at this at 9 o'clock at night, I do apologize. So mostly what I wanted to discuss is what do things look like in the regulatory context right now with AB 117, AB 117 being enacted in 2002, and that's what enabled CCA. So what you're going to see is on the top line is CCAs that have launched. So MCE is in orange, Sonoma followed in 2014, and then now we have several new CCAs launching. So the red vertical line is sort of CCA pre and post. The next line down relates to our energy efficiency programs. So in 2012, very soon after we launched, we did a program where we elected to administer energy efficiency programs. So that was a very small energy efficiency program. Subsequently, 2 years later, we requested to make a larger energy efficiency program through a different statutory provision. But we still had to work around PG&E's pre-existing programs. In 2016, so another 2 years later, we have our low-income families and tenants program, which serves specifically low-income customers. And before the CPUC right now, we have a very comprehensive energy efficiency business plan. So I'll talk about that as well. But that's been our trajectory since we launched, very concrete steps forward in growing the energy efficiency programs and what Becky loves to call negawatts, so negative watts, so negative use of energy, which is the best possible way to use energy. The next line down is a topic that we've been talking a lot about tonight. First, we've been in the PCIA was started to apply to PCIA before CCA even existed. So that was in 2004, and you'll see also the line before, as soon as AB 117 was enacted, the CPUC was looking at how are we really going to implement community tree segregation. And so several foundational decisions came out at that time. And then it kind of fell off the radar. So when we launched, one of the most pressing concerns that we had related to the PCIA. So in 2012, I led a petition, a formal petition before the Public Utilities Commission with about 17 co-petitioners and around 50 supporting entities that requested comprehensive reform of the PCIA. We have been fighting it kind of in dribs and drabs ever since that petition was denied. PCI has now gained traction again, and there's a PCI rulemaking. But in thinking about the context, there has been a pretty long, quiet period with not very much with no looking at comprehensive reform. And down on the bottom line, this just relates to long-term procurement planning and whether or not, how the CPUC is looking at CCA loads. So right when AB 117 was enacted, there was definitely the thought, okay, as the utilities are planning for their loads, what does that really look like? How much CCA load should we really be looking at? And so they included CCA load departures in their projections. So that meant that there was going to be fewer stranded assets, fewer contracts that were going into the PCIA. And then that dropped off. So in 2007, they no longer included any thoughts or projections on CCAs, even as they were beginning to form and launch. So even after we launched, we still really weren't accounted for in departing load. We finally had CCAs partially reflected in departing load in 2012 and even more accurately a little bit later on. And now the CPUC is looking at this integrated resources plan and where does CCA procurement fit into the overall state mix. So just a little bit of an anecdote for me is, so I started here at MCE in 2009. And so I've been here a while. And in a way, we've gone from radio silence to really intense interest, when some advanced planning may have been a little bit more advantageous. So this year we've had one customer choice en banc. That meant that all of the CPUC commissioners came together to consider CCA issues and other customer choice issues. There's also going to be an informal public workshop held by the CPUC up in Sacramento on October 31st. And to get a sense of how far we've come from radio silence, in essence, is one of the panels is entitled Shark Tank Style Discussion on Customer Choice Models. So what is the market supposed to look like and where does CCA fit in there? There are already a lot of CCAs out there. So I just want to give a little bit of context of where we're at. So on energy efficiency, I'm going to go through this very quickly because it's quite late. And Shelley did an excellent summary of where we're at in these specific proceedings. But just the biggest picture overview on energy efficiency, we're expecting a proposed decision at any time we completed briefing. And this is the impact. So our existing annual budget is $1.6 million. And our proposed budget in the first year of operations of our new plan is going to be $7.4 million. So this is a really transformative change in energy efficiency. So we're very much looking forward to that proposed decision coming out. On the PCI rulemaking, Justin discussed this as well. Basically, the scoping memo that Justin had mentioned broke in this PCI rulemaking, so what a comprehensive, hopefully, reform of the PCIA, what is that broken into? The first track relates to these exemptions for care and medical baseline customers, whether or not those customers should receive those exemptions from the PCIA. They currently, medical baseline does not pay the PCIA. And then with the alternatives, track 2, which is concurrent with the first track, what are the alternatives to the current PCIA methodology? And I would consider this, for such a large and comprehensive topic, it is fast-tracked. And so the resolution of this is expected in the middle of next year. With regards to the integrated resources plan, again, as I mentioned, this is how does our integrated resources plan fit into the resource planning at the CPUC level? And it really does boil down to local control and what does it look like for decision making here at the board level. I am just going to mention that we have an IRP outstanding and we've had one for several years now, and we will be submitting those eventually to the CPUC, and that's expected in 2018. And so then it should fit together in a bigger picture of what procurement across the state looks like. So I don't want to take too much time, and I know we discussed a lot of items on that. Does anybody have, on the CPUC front, on the public utilities front, does anybody have specific questions?
This is Dave Trotter. One very quick question. On the energy efficiency business plan, what's driving such a significant increase? It's, a $5.8 million increase year to year.
Yeah, absolutely. So under our existing structure, we have been directed by the Public Utilities Commission to work around existing PG&E programs. So they have many existing programs, and so what we are focusing on in our existing portfolio is very much the underserved populations that are not being served well by PG&E in their energy efficiency programs. One core area for us is multifamily residences, but what we don't serve is the whole entirety of energy efficiency programs. And so when we're looking at this change from working around the edges, kind of working on the fringe of energy efficiency programs to really having a comprehensive program, that's why that change is so dramatic.
And what are we spending that $5.8 million on? That extra 5.8? Is it more staff? Is it more subsidies?
Well, there's going to be, so in the application itself, it's really touching more deeply into providing retrofits for single-family residences, for small commercial. So it's a lot more of actually providing services. That's the main driver of it. Our staffing is not expected to, proportionately or dramatically change as a result of this.
And there will be a significant increase in the amount of incentives that we give out on an annual basis for energy upgrades.
Appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Any other CPUC questions? And then with regards to the legislative session, again, I'm only just going to give the briefest of touches here because Shalini did the overview at the board retreat. So we successfully defeated the anti-CCA elements of SB 618. And then also we had a lot of very successful collaborations with the legislators. In the year ahead, this is going to be the last session for Governor Brown and for the pro tem Kevin De Leon. So we can expect some landmark legislation in the coming year. And then the two items that have been carried forward to this coming year are regionalization, which we've discussed earlier in the meeting as it related to our IRP, and SB 100. SB 100 did not make it through this session, but it would require 100% greenhouse gas-free energy. So again, there's more thorough updates on sort of more granular parts of that in the update. But are there legislative questions that anybody has? Is everybody still awake? Oh, good. Oh, they are awake on the other end of the line. Okay. I know that legislative and regulatory is always the most exciting. So that's it for me. There isn't anything else?
If you're not awake, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. So now that brings us to our final item, board member and staff matters. Does anybody have anything to share with this group?
I just have something I think that was missed in the packet. You know, something that you want us to approve legislative ambassadors. Was that under this last topic?
Yeah, thank you for noting this, Director Fuller. This is not an action item, but I actually did want to take a moment to recognize and thank the folks that have stepped up and offered to be a legislative ambassador for MCE. Starting this month, there won't be a whole lot of activity, a little bit of in-district meetings, and the activity is going to pick up early next year. So we really appreciate the MCE board members that have stepped up to take on this role. It'll be a big help.
I would suggest that you might want to consider adding Bill Dodd since he represents Benicia.
Yeah, so we've got Senator Dodd on here.
Oh, I see.
Is that who you're referring to?
Okay, got it.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's an
Yeah, too
important.
many eyes aren't working.
Let us know if you'll see any other omissions. Yeah. And I do have a quick staff matter, which is just a reminder that our next meeting, the primary location where we'll have most of the staff and activity will be in Concord. If you're not able to participate at that location, let us know. We need to have any other locations listed on the website, and we can't change them last minute. They need to be posted on the agenda with the board packet. So please respond to a request from Darlene to let us know where you'll be attending, and stick to the plan. Thank you.
I have one simple question. Some of us seem to have alternates and some of us don't. What is the actual policy? Can my council appoint an alternate for my position?
Every board member should have an alternate appointed, and usually that's done at the same time that the primary board member is appointed. So if that hasn't happened already at your council, any time going forward would be great. We really encourage you, if you can't make it, to have your alternate here in your place.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
All in favor, leave.
Going once, going twice,